Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for International Career Series, our first ICS program of 2022. My name is Evan Verplu, and I'm the program manager here at the International Relations Council. The International Relations Council strengthens Kansas City's global perspective by maintaining an active dialogue around world events, global issues, and their impact on our community. As a nonpartisan educational nonprofit organization, the IRC values informed civil discourse, accessibility, and substance as we work to sharpen our community's 21st century global acumen. Whether you're graduating and preparing to enter the job market, looking for a change of career, or just seeing what's possible out there, our International Career Series provides that opportunity. We generally on a monthly basis we'll invite an individual to share their work in an international field, offer insight into the educational background, career paths, the intricacies of the field, as well as provide recommendations for your own job search. So we encourage you to ask questions throughout the program and take as much time to get to know these extraordinary individuals as you can and hear some of their stories. Today's topic is work in the NGO and nonprofit field with Pritha Hariharan. Throughout the program, we invite you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions for Pritha about her specific career path or more general questions about NGO and nonprofit work. We hope to get to as many questions as we can throughout the program. We're also recording today's program, so if you have to step away or leave early today, just know that there will be an opportunity to view the program at a later date. So now I would like to pass the program over to our leader for today's session. Pritha Hariharan serves as Unbound's International Program Director for Asia and Africa. Her areas of expertise include microfinancing and cash transfers, entrepreneurship, women's empowerment, and global development in Africa and Asia. She is fluent in English, Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, and Urdu. Pritha, thank you so much for being here, and I invite you to take it away.
Thank you, Evan. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you, Evan, for agreeing to advance my slides today. So if we can get started. So as Evan mentioned, my name is Pritha Hariharan, and I'm the International Program Director for Africa and Asia for Unbound. It's my pleasure to be speaking with you all today. Evan, if you can advance to the next slide, please. So a little bit about Unbound and a little bit about what makes my position or my work international. Unbound is an international nonprofit organization headquartered right here in Kansas City. We work in 19 countries around the world. Our primary focus is walking with children and elderly living in extreme poverty to empower them really to walk a path out of poverty. We do this by connecting individual sponsors, mostly in the United States, with individual sponsored friends in the countries where we work. Globally, we support over 280,000 families around the world. About a third of these families are in Asia and Africa, and the remaining are in Latin America. So our presence is bigger in Latin America. That's where we historically started. And in my role, I support and supervise our programs in Asia and Africa. So Evan, if you could click to the next slide, please. So what do I do in my role? I provide leadership for over 800 staff members in 11 countries. We have over 120,000 sponsored families in Africa and Asia that kind of come under the purview of the programs that I support. I supervise 2 cross-functional regional teams in Kansas City, one Asia team and an Africa team. And they are consisted of a project director and an accountant and what we call a specialist. And so that's kind of like, so there is an international component of supervision as well as a local component. And then there's also a heavy travel component, of course, pre-pandemic. Like all of us, I haven't been able to travel to any of our program locations since 2020. My last trip was February 2020, and I'm looking forward to traveling again. So if you can move to the next slide, Evan. So my journey to international work, my personal journey was not a straightforward one. It took kind of a circuitous path. I worked in the technology field, mostly telecommunications and hardware and software industries for over 15 years. before making the conscious shift towards international work. Although some of my previous jobs were also with international companies, they were mostly domestically based in the US. But I always had the desire and the hope to work in the international nonprofit sector, but I had to make a few stops first before getting there. So this primarily had to do with my immigration status and the kind of work I was authorized to do in the US. But I want to make sure I point out that that would probably not be typical for most people. A lot of people coming out of college are fortunate enough to go into their chosen field of work in the international sector. So if you can click to the next slide, Evan. My educational background, so I grew up in India. So most of my early education was in India. I got an undergraduate degree from India, from Acharya N.G. Ranga Agricultural University in Hyderabad in India. So agriculture is one of the few four-year degrees offered in India. Most degree programs are 3 years long, with the exception of some disciplines. So the four-year program allowed me to be able to come to the US to get a master's right after my undergraduate degree ended. So some trivia for any K-State alumni or students in the audience. My university has a special connection to K-State, my undergraduate university. So it was actually established in 1964 by a collaboration between the USAID and K-State was tapped by USAID to establish an agricultural university in South India using some grants that the land grant system was providing in the US. So that's some trivia. It's a little K-State connection that we had. And then after my undergraduate degree, like I mentioned, Evan, if you can move to the next slide, please. I came to the US on a student visa. I went to Texas A&M University in Corpus Christi first, which, by the way, is the birthplace of Whataburger. I received an MBA from there. And after my MBA, I moved to Kansas City and started my long career in technology that I previously mentioned. I started with Sprint, and then I switched several companies before, in 2011, deciding to make a conscious effort to pivot my career towards the nonprofit international sector. So I did that by getting a degree in Masters in Global and International Studies from KU. And then when I graduated in 2014 with that degree from KU, in 2015, I started my current job at Unbound. So that's kind of how I, in a roundabout way, came to where I am. And so I've been at Unbound for about 7 years now. If you can click to the next slide. So finding international work, what helps? So what does help when you're seeking international work? So I'm sharing some of my own observations. But when I was asked to do this presentation by Evan, I also crowdsourced some answers from some of my colleagues. And this is a combined list of some of my experiences and theirs. So first and foremost, I would say that if you don't already speak more than one language, try to get there. It is one of the biggest advantages in seeking work in the international field. You automatically get to the forefront of other candidates that are only monolingual. And then network. I would say that every job I've ever had has come about as a result of networking, whether it's through professors, colleagues, and just keep in mind, no contact is unimportant. And then reading widely and in a broad variety of topics is another one. If you're one of those fortunate people that right out of college already know, I want to work in water services, or I want to build wells for those who don't have access to water, great. You can hone in on that topic. But if you're like me and you didn't know much beyond, well, I want to work in the international field and I want to do something in the nonprofit sector. But beyond that, I didn't really have a clear idea of what I wanted to do. So read, listen, watch widely to see what might interest you. And then there is nothing more valuable than living and immersing yourself in a different culture, whether it's study abroad for a semester or living abroad for work. Grab that opportunity if you can. That will help you go a long way in seeking international work. And then this is something that surprised me as well, having a specialized skill. So even if you are, let's say if you are majoring in accounting or project management or psychology, but you speak another language, that is a transferable skill that you can take to any sector, whether it's international nonprofit, international for-profit, whatever the case may be. So I'm a generalist and I got here this way because of certain steps along the way, but having a specialized skill like that really does help. And then if you can click to the next slide, Evan. So what are some of the knowledge and skills I've learned as a result of my career? These are just a few, and I'm sure there are many, many more. These are just what I have learned, I guess some of what I've learned. Working and interacting with people and teams from 7 different countries allows you to learn and grow culturally in ways that are just incredible. You learn to pick up on cultural cues and you adapt yourself as needed. You learn to quickly manage your time, especially when you're taking 6 a.m. calls or 9 p.m. calls due to the time difference, particularly in my case, since I work with Asia and Africa, where there's an extreme time difference. With Asia, with India and the Philippines, it's a 12.5-hour to 13-hour difference. Whereas with Africa, it's slightly less drastic. It's an 8-hour difference, but we're still talking it's 8 p.m. there right now. So a lot of times I go to bed and I wake up to a full inbox of things that I need to respond to that people have sent me during their workday. And then also in my job, I have had to become very comfortable with public speaking. I cannot begin to tell you the number of times I've been asked to give an impromptu speech to 1,000 sponsored families, an inspirational speech. So that is something also that you will develop if you don't have already. And finally, conflict resolution. In my position, I often find myself having to resolve conflicts between parties. So you learn to listen and take a step back and understand both viewpoints before offering a mediation or even resolution. So if you can click to the next slide, Evan. So what my work is not, I can only speak to Unbound. So because it's a nonprofit organization, it is, I will say it is not charity in the traditional sense of the word. We don't believe in handing out charity. There's a popular saying about not giving a man a fish, but rather teaching him how to fish in order for him to be sustainable in the long term. Well, at Unbound, we go a step further. We ask the proverbial man, do you even like fish? Our program is a conditional cash transfer program in which the families we serve receive a cash transfer in return for meeting some program requirements. We don't dictate how the family spends that money. We're big believers in accompaniment and walking with the people that we serve. So again, that travel is a big component of that. If you've never been to a place where you are serving the people that live there, you're not really going to understand their realities as much as being on the ground does. And then finally, our programs at Unbound are not driven from a North American perspective. All of our staff, local staff in the countries, in the 19 countries where we work, are local. We don't have any expatriates that go and live in the countries where we work. And they are locally driven, locally staffed. We provide the support and a framework. Of course, we audit the program. So we do conduct very regular program quality audits as well as financial audits to ensure that the funds are being spent in the way that they're intended to be spent. And a big part of those audits are those trips that I mentioned, which I'm anxious to begin traveling again, pandemic permitting. So that's kind of like I wanted to throw out there what my work is not. Please click to the next slide, Evan. Some surprises in this field that people are maybe, especially if you work with Asia and Africa, they don't expect is, I alluded to this earlier, but be prepared to work early morning or late evening hours, especially if you want to work in the time zone that I'm talking about. My colleagues who support Latin America, of course, tend to have similar work hours that we do here today. So 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. here. So they're a little bit more fortunate in that. But that is something, if you work on sort of my side of the world, you will get used to, and it will be a surprise at the beginning. And then travel, I love it. I will not exchange anything for it. But traveling internationally, while it is very enriching, is not always glamorous. Hotel rooms with a lizard as your roommate, intestinal distress, occasional sickness, and having to communicate in a language you may or may not speak to a doctor in a hospital. True story in Madagascar. These are all realities that we face in our work. And then finally, Zoom, while it is great and wonderful and it's allowing me to talk to you all today, it cannot replace being on the ground. These last 2 years have really stretched our imaginations and our work to where we've had to adapt and adjust. But as I said before, I cannot wait to get on the plane again and be on the ground where the actual work is happening. So that's really kind of where I was going to sort of open it up for questions after this. So Evan, if you want to click to the next slide. I want to thank you for giving me the time to talk to you all today, but also open it up for questions. I kept everything at a pretty high level. So are there any questions I can answer or any thoughts that people have?
I guess I'll kind of start things off a little bit. Was there, you made a kind of a relatively distinct shift from, a corporate environment into a nonprofit field. Was there like a specific, you alluded to it a bit, was there like a specific moment or kind of an aha moment or something that made you say, yes, this is the career shift that I want to make?
That is a very good question. Yes and no. So like I said, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to work in the international sector. So around the time that I made this career shift, I was looking for jobs. I was not employed at the time. I had a young child at home. I was looking for jobs, and I actually had 3 prospects I was looking at. And they were, 2 of them were very similar. One was Unbound and another local international nonprofit organization. And then the third was actually KU, as a international student advisor for international students that are coming in from other countries to study at KU. And when I started the process, KU was at the top of my list because it was very close to my heart. I was an international student and I wanted to kind of give back and be involved with international students. And I love the university environment. So I just saw myself going on campus every day and working with students. But during the interview process, that flipped for me to where over that course of that's 4 to 6 week period when I was interviewing with different organizations, that I decided that this is where I wanted to take it and not the higher education setting. So there was, and I think a lot of it had to do with me having met the people that work at Unbound and interviewing with. I had 6 interviews before they offered me the job. So a lot of it had to do with just really understanding their philosophy and where they come from and the work. And then for me, the big decision factor in that was travel, that I would get to travel to all these locations, whereas the KU job involved very little. And unless you consider Kansas City to Lawrence travel. And so that was, for me, was the travel and the opportunity to go back to India occasionally and kind of contribute to, in some way, to India was what made the focus for me.
Thank you. We have a question. What's the most interesting global experience you've had in life? I'm sure of many.
I don't know. Interesting. Would have to. I would say it was in the Philippines. I had food is always like a revealing experience for me, and how much I can push my own comfort zone. And I always used to say I will eat anything. I am not a very picky eater. But in the Philippines, I was once offered balut, which, if you are not aware of what balut is it's an egg. It's a boiled egg, but it is a boiled egg with a half-formed chicken embryo in it. So you kind of, when you eat it, you're eating this baby chick, and you're crunching the little bones and everything. That was my comfort level, where I said, I can't do this. This is too much for me to handle. So I think that would be one of them. As far as food goes, yeah, that's the one that comes to mind at the top of mind. I can't think of anything right now that is probably, I'll have to think some more on that to see what else comes to mind.
I was curious if you can speak a little bit more broadly in terms of Kansas City as an international community. What does it mean to work in an international space in Kansas City, where international is not always the most obvious thing for people given our geographical location within the country?
And I used to think the same way. Now, while Kansas City, while it is not like New York City or DC, it's not the first place that comes to mind when you think of international work. We do have a few organizations in Kansas City in the international space, Unbound being one of them, but we also have Children International that's headquartered out of here. If you're talking along the same lines as like a child sponsorship organization. And now in today's day and age, you could actually really live in Kansas City, and there are a lot of organizations that are allowing you to work remotely. So I have seen job postings out there for an organization based out of DC, and you're working from home and occasionally traveling either to the organization or to one of the program locations that they serve. But Kansas City has a rich, I think, both a cultural and international presence that people are maybe not aware of. Just speaking of Unbound, for example, like I said, we work in 19 countries. Just in my department alone, there are people that speak 7 different languages from 11 countries, I believe, the last time I checked. And this is just my department of 20 people. And there's a rich source of cultural knowledge and information in Kansas City that I think sometimes we are not aware of. The IRC is another example of an organization that really works very hard to kind of bridge those cultural and educational bridges. Trying to think, the Ethnic Enrichment Festival is another place where if you just go, I know that hasn't happened since the pandemic, but that is another place where you can go to find out about just the wide variety of cultural diversity we have in Kansas City. There's a lot.
Yeah, truly. I mean, I'm still relatively new to Kansas City, but I'm continually amazed by exactly what you're talking about, the amount of cultural diversity, different groups of people, different organizations, working hard to represent the international community. It's incredible, and it's fun to be a part of. We have a question. It alludes to having a basis of knowledge about Asia, having grown up in India. But Camila is asking about the process about learning more about Africa and kind of immersing yourself in the culture there.
That's a very good question. Thank you, Camila. I will say even my Asia knowledge is very limited to India. I've learned a lot about the Philippines since I started working with the Philippines. But as far as Africa goes, of course, you read. So my first trip before, I'll use the example of Madagascar. I knew very little about Madagascar beyond the fact that they are an island nation. So before my trip, I bought a few books and tried to read up, and then you go there, and then really the only way to learn is to travel and visit and immerse yourself in the culture there. So every time I go back, I find that I learn something new. East Africa was, I would say, a little bit, quote unquote, easier for me because there is a lot of, historically, there is a lot of cultural and travel and food exchange between the East African countries and India. But for me, Rwanda, Madagascar continue to be sort of this cultural mystery that I just am amazed every time I go, I learn something new. Whether it's about the history or cultural practices or food, So again, I would say read if you can, meet people if you can, and talk to them about it. My very first trip before I went to Rwanda and Malawi, I didn't know anything about those countries. We didn't have any local contacts there or anything. So one of the things that I said, again, going back to my point about networking, I reached out to one of my KU my professors at KU, who I knew worked at the Command and General Staff College in Leavenworth here in Kansas, in Kansas. And I asked him if he had any students in his class that were from those two countries. And just like this is kind of the serendipitous thing that happens that sometimes blows my mind. He happened to have two students, one each from Malawi and Rwanda. So I reached out to them, and it was just kind of like, this was like cold calling, right? This is some strange person writing to you out of the blue and saying, hey, I want to introduce myself. I'm going to your country for the first time. Would you be willing to, I'm happy to buy you lunch. Would you be willing to meet me? And so I drove out to Leavenworth to meet these two individuals and met them for lunch, and just learned a lot in that 1 hour conversation. And during that conversation, they gave me resources. So they gave me local contacts on the ground. And then they said, talk to this person. When you get to Kigali, call this person. This is a great person to have. And so that's kind of how you build. So even if you think that, you know what, Evan at one point mentioned knowing somebody from India, maybe he can put me in touch with Pritha, who is from India. Just, and you know, I always tell myself, what's the worst that can happen? People are going to say no. So just, and then you haven't lost anything, but you've asked, and if you get something out of it, that's great. So that's kind of how I have approached it, reading, meeting people, and if possible, traveling to the place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. And your point about, yeah, what's the worst that can happen is absolutely right. It's amazing how small connections can grow into something so significant very quickly. And so taking this a little bit further, can you talk maybe a little bit about the role of mentorship in your life? Do you have specific people that you point to that really made a profound difference in whether it was your career path, your interests, things like that? As I get older and such, I've come to realize just how important these individuals can be in shaping one's life path.
Mm-hmm. That is also a very good question. I would say a couple of my KU professors come to mind. I think they really, when I was floundering and I was like not sure what I wanted to do, I was working at Garmin at the time, and I had this vague idea, vague notion of wanting to work in an international nonprofit at some point. I had three professors come to mind that I all took classes with all three of them, but they also ended up being on my thesis committee, that I used to have a lot of just frank conversations with. I'm not sure what I want to do. Do I want to go for a PhD, to do this, to do that? And even though they didn't directly lead me towards this line of work, what helped was getting the validation from them that I'm not completely off base here, that there is something I do have to offer to this field. I speak the languages, I have the cultural expertise. And for those of you who maybe grew up in other countries or speak another language or have traveled extensively, you do have a lot to offer. So one thing I found myself doing was I would unintentionally short sell myself. And the role that these mentors played for me was to bring me back and say, no, that's not true. You do have a lot to offer. The cultural expertise that you bring and the languages you speak. So the confidence that they gave me and helped me was much more, very, very valuable for me to even think that I could, after 15 years in the corporate world, and just staying in my comfort zone to kind of get out of that comfort zone.
Absolutely, thank you. We have a question that came in. What sort of functional roles exist in the in an international NGO like Unbound? What sort of skill sets are valuable for applicants to bring with them?
That's such a great question. Thank you. like I said, I alluded to before, we have, so the headquarters at Unbound, like our Kansas City headquarters, we have project managers, we have marketers, so marketing, accounting, whether you're a finance major, if you have social media skills, we have a social media team in our marketing department. Really anything that you can, any discipline that you can think of that would fit in a for-profit organization has a place in an organization like Unbound. We have programmers, I mean, software developers. So if you want to focus your career in software development, but you want to do it in an international NGO, we have positions for software developers. So operations, if you want to focus on operations, really, we even have people who are data analysts who can help us kind of figure out our performance, where are we, where do we want to be, and just really any skill that you can think of that can fit in a for-profit organization has a place in a place like Unbound. So I wouldn't, if you are a accountant, for example, I wouldn't discount the possibility of working for an international NGO like Unbound.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a very good point. I think there, might be a misconception with this type of work that, you have to be an expert in all regions of the world, or, up to date on every single, news event, or have these really nuanced skill sets, and really, the individual skills that are applicable across all career paths. I myself am not, on the programs we put, I'm not an expert on any of these topics, but I do know how to handle the logistics of putting an event together. So, anybody's personal skill sets, I think, can be applicable in this field. So that's a good point.
And even sales. I mean, I forgot to mention sales, but because we there is a sort of quote unquote business component to this. We do have to find sponsors. We do, we are fortunate in that we don't have to do traditional fundraising like most nonprofit, a lot of nonprofit organizations, but there is a component of fundraising, which is looks slightly different from what fundraising might look like for a different organization, but there is that component too. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Adam.
Oh no, that's a wonderful point. So we have a question from Helena. She's asking, how's the workload in this area, and how do you balance your life between professional and personal life? So, work-life balance, this field can be a lot of work, and a lot of hours. So talk about a little bit about your balance.
So the workload can be challenging, but I would argue that is true of any job, really. I mean, the different thing I would say about my particular role is the challenge that comes from working with people in different time zones. And there are some disadvantages to that, but I would also say there are advantages to it. For example, this morning, if I had a 5 a.m. call, that is a really early morning for me, but it also allows me to log off, let's say at 3 p.m. and be there for my son when he comes home from school, or not have to worry about the fact that, I have to work from 8 to 5. So there's also that flexibility that comes with working different hours. So it is a little challenging, but it's not insurmountable. The travel, being away from your young kids, can get it's emotionally taxing. But what I've come up with ways to help both my kids and myself cope with it. For example, when my oldest was younger, he used to say, "Mommy, don't go to Philippines office." So I would make up like these elaborate things for him to do while I was gone. So Mommy's gone for 10 days. So I'm going to make you 10 cookies. So when you eat 1 cookie per day, and when all the cookies are gone, I'll be home. So just things like that like you and your family kind of adjust, and they understand. I think my youngest doesn't understand. He's too young to understand. And my oldest is old enough now to understand that this is important, and what Mommy does is important to her, and it's important. So we learn to adjust. But then I would say an organ, like I'm extremely fortunate to have the flexibility that I have. It's that, if I have a 5 a.m. call, nobody is expecting me to do a 5 a.m. call and then put in another, full 12 hours. So that is also something, if you're looking for work with an organization, to see that the organization believes in the same values that you do. And so it has to be a match both ways. And then was there a second part to that question, or was that it?
No, I think that was the main crux of the question. Yeah, it was, talking generally about workload and balance. So I think that was perfect. Had a question from Marcella. I'm a little bit unsure exactly how to interpret it. She says, what was your biggest challenge you faced in order to enter an international organization? I'm not sure if that means in regards to getting, the role that you currently have, but maybe just expand on some general challenges that you face that maybe are unexpected.
Well, so for me personally, I wouldn't say this was a challenge for entering an international organization. Now you have to think about, I think it would help if you think about it in two ways: international for-profit, international nonprofit. The nonprofit world in general, I found was a little bit more difficult to get into. But having said that, that was because I started out my career in the for-profit world. So when you get in that path, it's difficult to shift and move over to like a completely different, from a for-profit to a nonprofit world. That was, I would say, was more challenging. What I think, if you think about, for example, if you think about international work in a for-profit company, and it exists, Garmin has positions that are international, or Cerner has positions that are international. Those are different. I think in that case, what would help is if you speak another language, if you have a functional skill that's transferable to that organization, plus you're bringing the cultural expertise, those things will help you get there. But specifically, my challenges had to do more with, well, in the first part of my career, it had to do more with my visa status and immigration status. And then once I had been in that for so long, to just like remove myself and switch to a whole different field was challenging. But I feel like each individual's perspective on that is going to be different, and the challenges that you face are going to be different. I don't know if I covered that, Evan. What do you think?
I think so.
Okay.
Another question, have you found LinkedIn to be a helpful tool in making connections? And maybe I'll add a second part of that. Are there other tools that you think people should be involved with, whether they're online or otherwise, that really help kind of build out one's network?
I am terrible at using LinkedIn, so I am probably the last person you should be asking about LinkedIn. I will say I have heard from others, and I am forcing myself to get used to using LinkedIn. When I made the switch so the first part of my career, during my first 15 years of my career, LinkedIn wasn't really a thing. It was more, looking online and applying for positions on the company's websites, or like monster.com and Indeed and places like that. LinkedIn started getting really more popular around the time that I kind of made this switch. And I will say I created a profile for LinkedIn, but it's very bare bone, my own profile. But having said that, I do think it's an incredibly strong tool for anybody that's in the workforce right now, or is actively looking to be there, and to have a robust LinkedIn profile and to make connections. But I personally have not used it much and would like to get better at it. I just don't prioritize it, I think. And I haven't had the need to. So if I'm forced to, I will. But for example, if I'm actively looking for a job, I will probably force myself to use LinkedIn more, but I haven't had the need to, let's say that. But I would encourage anybody graduating now or looking actively for a job to definitely take advantage of that tool.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. I myself as well don't use it as extensively, nearly as extensively as I should, but I would also have that recommendation for anyone looking for a job in general, no matter the field. We have a question in regards to language. You know, I presume maybe this is someone who is perhaps looking to specialize in another language or just get expand their linguist knowledge. Do you have any languages particularly that you would recommend or might suggest someone pursue? You know, this person tags it, you know, besides English. We recently had a program, you know, asking the question, is English the world's language? And we got a mixture of answers, and of course everyone has a different perspective. But I could just be curious to hear you speak a little bit more broadly on different languages and what they can offer.
In general, like I can speak for Unbound, we have a lot more Spanish speakers, bilingual English Spanish speakers than we do English other language. And by that I mean Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, Swahili, those kind of languages. So I would say Spanish seems to be helpful. And then if you were several years ago is also when I occasionally used to look at the UN jobs, and Spanish is less likely mentioned there. More French is more mentioned. If you want to work in West Africa that were previously colonized by France, that is something to look at. I think French does carry a lot of value, and also some countries like Rwanda, where French, and Madagascar, where French happens to be a second official language. So in my experience, from what I've seen so far, I would say Spanish, French stand out. And I've also seen Arabic mentioned on some of the UN jobs. But if you're looking to work in the US, an organization like Unbound, Unbound still, like I said, has a bigger presence in Latin America than we do in Asia and Africa. Spanish definitely goes a long way. Yeah.
Thank you. We've talked a little bit about, you know, looking for jobs using LinkedIn, things like that. We have a question about maybe some other places that you've found been helpful for looking for jobs, for jobs in NGO work. If there's maybe some resources that people might not think of that they should be utilizing when looking for a job.
I think I don't know if this website is still out there and operating. And locally in Kansas City, Nonprofit Connect does post jobs that include both local nonprofit jobs like based in Kansas City, as well as so Unbound currently has a couple openings listed on Nonprofit Connect. I think idealist.org used to be another one. I think they're still around. And then, of course, the big one is Indeed. I hear about Indeed a lot these days. In addition to that, if you know of organizations, for instance, today you've heard about Unbound. For about 10 years, I would go check on Unbound's website. Before they used to be called Christian Foundation for Children and Aging was Unbound's old name before the name change happened in Unbound in 2013. So in early on in my career in 2005, I learned about CFCA, and I would occasionally just go to their website, directly to their website, to see what was out there. So if you know of organizations already, so you've heard about Unbound today, go check out their website. A lot of times organizations will post jobs on their website at about the same time that they post in some of these other job boards, or even before. So if you're already aware of organizations, look there. And then sometimes I would also say, if you're currently in a university, take advantage of your career services that your university offers, because that can also, and your professors, if you have any professors that can even remotely connect you to people or organizations. Sometimes your professors might know about organizations you've never heard of. That could be very, very useful as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. This question directly relates to Unbound. Says, how does Unbound decide which countries to work in? And also, does Unbound ever leave a country?
We have left countries. I'll answer that part first. We used to be in a lot more countries than we are currently. We used to work in places like Liberia, Haiti, and sometimes the decision to leave a country is based on external factors, whether it's political disturbance or the local government decides to stop working with us or allow us to work in that country. But sometimes the decision to leave is made on a happier note, in the fact that our goal is not to be permanently supporting these families. Our goal is to get them to the point where they're self-sufficient enough, or the country's economy improves to a point where they're able to be self-sufficient and support themselves. So we have phased out of countries where we have felt like we kind of look at a few factors. We look at, one of the biggest things we look at is the Human Development Index. We have some countries that we are starting to look at right now that are what we're calling high income countries, where the standard of living and the income and the GDP is improving to a point where Unbound's assistance doesn't go that far. So $1 goes a lot further in Madagascar and Uganda than it does in Costa Rica. So there are some factors we look at when we decide whether to leave a country or not, and it's usually a phased exit. So we will exit in a way that leaves either an organization behind for them to locally raise funds and be self-sufficient in, or that the Unbound's presence is no longer required in that country. How we decide, the last place where we opened a new program was in Rwanda, and that was in 2019. And again, we had a set of factors that we looked at, including Human Development Index, where the need is the most, purchasing power of the dollar, and the willingness and the ease of working in that country with the local government. So during this last phase of our expansion into Rwanda, we actually had a list of 11 countries that we started out with. We narrowed it down to 3. And then we narrowed it down to Rwanda, Malawi, and Nepal. And a team of us from Kansas City visited each of those countries and did some further due diligence, met with government officials, looked at the process of what does it take to set up a new organization here. Do they have, are they open to working with an American organization? Not a lot of places are open to welcoming America with open arms. And so we look at a variety of factors, and then it's kind of a decision on whether we want to expand into that country or not. Again, like I said, the last time we did that was Rwanda, and hopefully we'll be there. We will restart the expansion soon, but yeah, that's kind of how we decide where to work. In general, Latin America, the incomes are improving in general. There are exceptions, of course, but Asia, Africa is where there tends to be still a lot of need and a lot of need for organizations like Unbound to work there, as well as the exchange rate tends to be favorable, where, like I said, $1 today is 75 rupees in India. When I moved to the US, $1 was about 30 rupees. So it goes it goes a long way. 70 rupees goes a long way in India versus it does $1 goes in, for example, Costa Rica or even in the US. So.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a question from Cheryl. What role has environmental science played in the solutions that loan recipients work towards?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll try to message Cheryl and see if we can clarify that a little bit more. In the meantime, if you could talk maybe a little bit about goals in your career. Are you someone that kind of sets goals or milestones that you're looking to hit? And if so, could you maybe talk about some that you have in the future? Or do you just kind of, are you more of a day-to-day type thinker and worker with your career. And I don't know if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure, sure. In my case, specifically my case, I think I'm a little bit of both. It is easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and not think about, what do I want to do? That's one of my least favorite questions in an interview. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? I don't know. I didn't expect a pandemic 5 years ago. But that being said, I feel like personally, I always have the next 5 years in the back of my mind, which is how I really ended up making that shift from the corporate world to the nonprofit world. Along the way, I personally feel like I'm constantly thinking of what can I do to get myself there. So, and a lot of times, sometimes it's a lot of missteps, and not missteps. I wouldn't say missteps. It's more, I tried this. That didn't really help me to get there, but I grew in some ways. Along the way, I got a lot of certifications and things like that. That didn't exactly help me like shift my career to the nonprofit world like I wanted it to, but it has helped me along the way. Everything I've learned along the way has helped me to do my job currently. And then I think I would be disingenuous if I said I'm not thinking right now about what my next 5 years or 10 years or 15 years will bring, because you kind of have to think about that and plan for the future. So I don't know. I mean, you cannot ignore the day-to-day, but you're also, in my case, for example, I am actively working towards improving my Spanish. Spanish is not one of the languages I speak, but I feel like I would have a lot more to contribute to not only Unbound, but anywhere I go in the future, if I did have that, even if it's just, even if I'm never a fluent speaker, even if I had a basic understanding of the language, I think I would enhance my own contributions to any organization that I go to that much more, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. We are starting to get towards the end. If anyone has any final questions, please invite you to submit them. If not, one topic, one question that anyone generally working in the international space is quite interested in is the role of travel, and also something that's been extensively challenging over the last 2 years in our inability to do it as extensively as we would have liked. Can you talk perhaps a little bit about maybe some of your travel tips, as well as maybe some travel that you're particularly interested in doing here as we knock on wood, hopefully start to emerge from the pandemic? Yeah.
Oh, travel tips. Oh my. As far as tips go, these are like the generic ones. Pack light. Be prepared for like any eventuality, and dress in layers, and because you never know what the weather is going to do. Take your medications with you, and especially so I spoke about the intestinal distress a little bit earlier. That is something that is often, it's not a pretty thing to talk about, but it is something you want to be prepared for. What else can I say? As far as where am I? Oh, big travel tip. I don't know if I have them here. If you've ever seen those travel cubes, they are a lifesaver, because you buy these like little cubes and you pack your little clothes in there. And especially when you're going through security and things, they are super easy to take in and out. So buy those travel cubes. They are a great investment to help you kind of be more organized in your travel. I personally travel with a little immersion water heater. It's like a little coil that you buy on Amazon. And I have a travel mug that I don't mind if it breaks, I can leave it where it breaks. So it's one of the cheapest coffee mugs I have at home, but it is very useful. I like my coffee first thing in the morning, and a lot of places that we go, either don't have coffee or it's not really good. So I carry my own like little Starbucks pouches and my little immersion heater. And that's what I use for my coffee in the morning. So those little immersion heaters are really, really useful. Also, don't drink tap water. I've made the rookie mistake of drinking tap water before and falling violently ill. As far as where am I looking forward to traveling and where I have to travel, those are, I think, two things. I am tentatively planning a trip to India for work in April. Hopefully that will happen if cases continue to go down. Looking forward to that for two reasons. One, because I have to go because for work, and two, also because it's India and it's it's the mothership, so to speak. So my mom, I'll see my mom again just for a day. So I'm also really, really looking forward to being back in Rwanda because I haven't had the chance to go since 2019, since we established the program there. And I am also really in love with Rwanda, the country. I really like the place a lot. So I think those are the two, for my priorities for this year, those are the two this year. There are more, but for now, that'll do.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Cheryl, do we have time? Cheryl expanded on her question. Okay, so our work, Cheryl, does not do directly with agricultural assistance or agricultural knowledge. That being said, our local programs sometimes do provide that kind of like training and assistance to sponsored families if they request it. Again, like I said, it all has to come from the families. So in Uganda, Uganda is big in coffee cultivation. So our program in Uganda, which actually our Uganda program coordinator was featured in one of IRC's events a few months ago, and Teddy, I don't know if you remember her, Evan. In Uganda, they actually have a program to help coffee farmers improve their production and to be in an environmentally sustainable way. But that is an exception. We don't do that in every place that we work. It depends on what the local population needs and what they're asking for. So the request and the need comes from the families. We call it expressed felt needs of the families. And when they express their needs, and that's what our local programs try to help them accomplish. I hope that answers your question, Cheryl.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pritha, for taking the time today. And it looks like, yes, that did answer your question. So I'm just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to just share this last slide here, just for anybody who may want to reach out with any further questions. But I really invite anyone who wants to learn more about Unbound to visit their website and learn more about the wonderful and inspiring work that you do on a regular basis. So thank you so much, everyone who took the time out of your day to join this program. If you'd like to revisit, I just remind you that the program will be available on our YouTube page, probably here by the end of the day. If you'd like to visit that, and we're getting a lot of thank yous and well dones in the chat here as well. And then, so I invite anyone to please stay tuned to the IRC website. If you are looking to engage with us further, we do have a couple in-person events, some of our first really in a long time next week. On Monday, March 7th, we'll be welcoming the State Secretary of the Latvian Ministry of Defense to the National World War I Museum and Memorial at 6 p.m. And then on Wednesday, the former UK ambassador to China, Christopher Hum, will be visiting Pulcinelli's boardroom on the plaza here in Kansas City. That's at 6:30 on Wednesday. That's presented in partnership with the English Speaking Union of Kansas City. Please visit our website, irckc.org. Also visit our YouTube channel, which features, I think, over 100 recordings of past IRC programs. Pritha, thank you again for taking the time today to take us through your career and provide all the tips and recommendations. It's extraordinarily valuable, and your work is very, very inspiring. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.